Hello and welcome to Transfermarkt TV. My name is Stefan and I'm joined by Euan today to discuss a pretty big story. Champions League football this season, and the new format has brought up a number of interesting results, but one that perhaps took most people's interest was Real Madrid's 3-1 defeat to AC Milan. It came shortly after their 4-0 defeat to Barcelona in El Clasico, and Euan, you've put together a really interesting article for Transfermarkt this week looking at some big issues for Real Madrid. What can you tell us about Carlo Ancelotti's side this season in general? There's the big kind of elephant in the room, which we'll obviously get onto later in the video, by the name of Kylian Mbappe. But aside from that, are there other issues, or is it simply him? Or, talk us through what you've learned from the data and speaking to people in Spain.
Look at Madrid's downturn in performances and results and statistics this season, and perhaps naturally look at Kylian Mbappe and view him as the reason why. And I think he is a major contributing factor. Obviously not the only one. Just to name two others off the top of my head, Toni Kroos retiring has been a big problem for Real Madrid. Losing Dani Carvajal to that serious injury has caused them real problems because they don't have another right back in the squad. But if you look across their metrics, they're losing more games than last season. They are scoring less goals. They're conceding more goals. They're registering less points per game. And if you look at the last two results, they've conceded 7 goals in their last 2 games at the Bernabeu. Both really costly defeats. The Barcelona one, that sparked outrage amongst Madristas because they lost 4-0 on their home turf to their arch rivals, which is never acceptable. But then the manner of defeat to AC Milan, who in Champions League, who I don't think are a great side, they're a good Serie A team. They're by far not the best side in that league. To go to Madrid and beat them 3-1 was really damaging. You seen against Dortmund, didn't you, that they went down at half-time, they mounted this incredible comeback, and perhaps people thought that might happen in midweek again, but it simply didn't. And they've got huge problems, Stefan. I think the biggest one is obviously fitting Mbappe into the team and how that's disrupted the cohesive unit they had and, the balance within their side. When Mbappe was going to Madrid, the most protracted transfer that I can certainly ever remember in my history, there was definitely two sides, people on two sides of the argument. One was, this is a cheat code, you're putting Mbappe into what was arguably already one of the best sides in the world. That's just unfair. And then there's other people, and I think you might be on this part of the argument, Stefan, where it was like, well, how do you fit him in? He wants to play on the left. That's where Vinicius plays. You've got a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you also managed to dig up some quotes from Benzema. And we talked about that earlier today, actually, in terms of him saying himself, look, Kylian Mbappe is not number 9. He's a player who drifts out left. That's where he obviously gets a huge amount of joy. That's where he likes to play. Obviously, he's a player of immense talent, but one of those key attributes is that acceleration, his top speed. And he obviously finds a lot more space out wide, taking on fullbacks rather than trying to take on 2 central defenders or, running into the box where it's often quite crowded, when typically most of the time in Real Madrid play teams in La Liga or the Champions League. So it makes perfect sense that, he would say, right, well, I've joined Real Madrid. This is my greatest dream. Play me where I'm supposed to be played. And then, they've obviously got Vinicius Junior there, who I think has been really interesting, the kind of emergence of Vinicius Junior. It's easy to forget now that there were still some doubts over Vinicius Junior and how good he would actually be for Real Madrid, even up to maybe 2 or 3 seasons ago. And it's almost as if this, as you said, protracted Mbappe pursuit has almost galvanized Vinicius Junior to turn into the player that he is today, because, there's been so much talk about how Real Madrid had to sign Mbappe. But it's got to the point now that by the time they signed him, they already had a player, more or less the exact same type of player of equal quality, in Vinicius Junior. He had risen to that level that Mbappe obviously kind of imposed on Real Madrid. And it now puts Carlo Ancelotti in this impossible situation of how do you kind of fit both these players into the same team. As I just in the article, and as people will be able to tell, Mbappe's goals and assists are still fine. He's got, I think, 6 goals in 10 La Liga games so far this season, which isn't terrible, but we obviously hold Mbappe to the very highest standards. He's kind of going toe-to-toe with Erling Haaland to become the next best player in the world after Ronaldo and Messi have moved on from their European careers. And he'll feel immense pressure. Real Madrid will feel immense pressure if he's not banging the goals the same way that Haaland is doing so for Manchester City in the Champions League or the Premier League. So, I mean, obviously going through this piece, Euan, and looking at the stats, where do you think Real Madrid can solve this problem? Do you think there's a solution to it in terms of how do you fit Mbappe and Vinicius Junior in that same team?
He has played the 4-3-3. He's reverted to a 4-4-2 diamond at times. Against AC Milan, he played a 4-4-2 flat. He played Bellingham off the left and Valverde off the right, which didn't work. I think Valverde's wife had a go at Ancelotti on Instagram saying, my partner's not a winger. So I wonder if Ancelotti will listen to her. But one of Ancelotti's best, or perhaps his best quality as a manager, is his man management skills. I don't think he's viewed as this like elite tactician like Guardiola and Klopp and Tuchel and managers like that. It's all about his man management, and I think that's really going to be tested here because you've got some huge egos in that dressing room. You look at Mbappe, you look at Vinicius. We've seen that all last week with the Ballon d'Or. You look at someone like Jude Bellingham, who has a big ego as well. If they're not happy, it's going to cause problems in the dressing room, and I think that's going to be a real issue for Ancelotti. Mbappe, for me, has to play as a number 9, so I think it's as much about him adapting to how Madrid want to play. But ultimately, I think it's going to be difficult. I think you look at their fixtures as well. They sit 18th in the Champions League phase. The next 2 away games are at Anfield against Liverpool and then away to Bergamo to play Atalanta. That's 2 tough games. And if Madrid don't finish in that top 8, listen, obviously you're still protected by the kind of playoffs, but they would expect to be up there, and there'll be a huge sort of outcry if they're not. You know what the Spanish press is like. The press is really ramping up on Ancelotti. I'm not sure how he keeps everybody happy, because you look at people talk about Rodrigo's minutes being a lot less, but there's other players there like Arda Güler who won't be happy with his minutes. He's not happy with his minutes. He's an incredible talent. You've got Endrick who won't be happy with his minutes as well. They've got a lot of players in those attacking areas, and I think it's going to come to a head at some point. It's really interesting. I can't really see a clear answer to how they do it. I think it's got to be Mbappe staying as the 9, the Vinicius staying on the left, and then maybe looking at, can you get more balance by perhaps playing someone like Valverde out on the right in a more defensive role, and then let Bellingham cheat a little bit and get higher. It's difficult. I don't know how you think they'll deal with that.
Yeah, I have no idea. To be perfectly honest with you, that's obviously why Carlo Ancelotti's paid the big bucks and I'm not. One player I did want to mention to you just before we finish up, and you've mentioned him a few times there, is obviously Jude Bellingham. It's a player who scored 19 goals and picked up 6 assists in 28 league games for Real Madrid last season. Obviously helped guide him to the Champions League as well. There's actually already been some reports, Euan, that he's a little unhappy about kind of being shoved out of the limelight by the likes of Vinicius Junior and Mbappe, but putting that kind of blind speculation to one side and looking at the actual football, it's one thing to kind of debate whether Mbappe or Vinicius Junior should be on the left, but we're also seeing this kind of reverberate through teams to the point that Bellingham doesn't seem like the same player that he was last season because he's got guys in front of him, doesn't he?
It's remarkable. I remember I wrote an article a couple of weeks ago about his start last season at Real Madrid. He was banging in the goals, he was getting loads of assists, he scored 2 winners against Barcelona in the Clásico last season. He's just not having that impact. There's 2 ways to look at that. I think firstly, his numbers last year weren't normal for a player in his position. I think they were above average. They were a little bit freakish for an extent, but his numbers this season are well below what you can expect. He get taken off against AC Milan. He kicked a water bottle. He was clearly frustrated. Again, it's as much about finding that balance in midfield as it is about the balance in the front three. I think with every game that Real Madrid play and don't do well, it shines light on how good Toni Kroos was. Even in his mid-30s, he was so important to how they play. They've not replaced him. Tchouaméni, for example, got booed off against AC Milan. There's talks he could be allowed to leave. Camavinga's not really kind of stepped up to be the player that he perhaps looked to be 18, 24 months ago. So that's not a real problem as well. How do you get that balance right in midfield? Because they've not had that either. And then you go into defence and they've got no right back, which I imagine they'll look to address in the January market. So yeah, there's a lot of problems for Real Madrid, and it gets even worse for them for the fact that their arch rivals are flying under Hansi Flick. They've scored more goals in La Liga than Madrid and Atletico combined, and it's very much when you have not to be disrespectful to Atletico, when you've got a 2-team league, if one team's not doing well and the other team's flying, and it only adds pressure onto the team that's not doing well. But I think it's too early to write Madrid off. They'll still be amongst the favourites to win the Champions League. They're probably arguably still close to being favourites to win the Liga. They're 9 points off Barcelona going into the weekend, albeit they have a game in the hand because sadly their game against Valencia was cancelled last weekend. But there's so many interesting subplots in Madrid, and with the press speculation around that club, it's only going to mount up as the season progresses if they don't fix it.
Yeah, seems like maybe the Galacticos era is back and in full swing. You guys can let us know in the comments below what you think. Do you think it was a mistake for Real Madrid signing Mbappe? Can you see a way that they can fit Vinicius Junior and the Frenchman into the same attacking lineup? And what becomes of Jude Bellingham this season? Will he have to change his role? Could he be placed at right back? Is that the solution to all Real Madrid's problems? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoy these videos, please do make sure to like and subscribe. It does a big, big favour for us in terms of the algorithm and getting those videos out to new fans. And until next time, we'll speak to you soon.